They told us civilization began in Mesopotamia. But what if that's a lie we've been repeating for 6,000 years? What if we're just survivors of something far greater, buried beneath water, time, and denial? Flood myths, ancient maps, and impossible structures all whisper the same forbidden truth: a high-tech civilization once walked this earth, and it vanished almost overnight. Not by war. By water. This isn't fantasy, it's evidence we were never meant to see. And once you connect the dots, you'll never look at history, or humanity, the same way again. Across continents and millennia, stories of a great flood echo with eerie similarity. From the Mesopotamian epic of Gilgamesh to the biblical deluge, and even to Mesoamerican and Hindu traditions, ancient civilizations all speak of waters that swallowed the earth. It's almost as if the memory of one cataclysmic event embedded itself in the DNA of human storytelling. But is this just myth? Or are these tales fragments of a real cataclysmic event passed down through generations, coded in song, scripture, and stone? The consistency across such vastly different cultures suggests more than coincidence, it hints at shared experience. Think about it, civilizations that had no known contact somehow described the same nightmare: raging seas, divine warnings, survival through arcs or mountaintop refuge. These flood myths weren't bedtime stories, they were warnings, maps of memory, shaped by trauma. And trauma, as we know, has a long half-life. Now imagine what might have been lost in such an event: entire cities drowned, technologies erased, cultures rebooted. Could this be why certain megalithic structures seem to appear suddenly, without clear evolution? It's not just about what was remembered, but what had to be rebuilt from ruin. When we leave behind legends and step into the soil, we find clues that speak louder than words. Across Mesopotamia, layers of silt and clay mark abrupt interruptions in human occupation. These aren't the slow fingerprints of erosion or seasonal rain, they're deposits left by sudden, overwhelming floods. In India and Pakistan, similar flood layers interrupt urban ruins of the Indus Valley. The sediment itself tells a story older than any book. Now let's look beneath the Black Sea. Around 5600 BC, geological data shows a rapid inundation event that changed everything. A freshwater lake became a salty sea almost overnight, flooding coastlines, erasing settlements, and forcing mass migrations. Scientists uncovered marine microfossils abruptly layered over terrestrial plant remains. That's not gradual change. That's a cataclysmic event, a literal sea level rise swallowing history. And it doesn't stop there. In South America, caves reveal stalagmites that grew in dry seasons and stopped during intense, prolonged floods. Even in North America, we find ancient shoreline markers hundreds of kilometers inland. These clues point to a world reshaped by water, over and over again. The Younger Dryas period, marked by extreme climatic shifts, is a prime suspect behind these repeated flood cycles. Earth wasn't just changing, it was drowning. What's fascinating is how consistent the timing seems. Just as oral traditions describe a great flood, the geological record highlights massive meltwater pulses and sea incursions around the same epochs. That includes melt from the Laurentide ice sheet, which surged into oceans and disrupted climate systems globally. The synchrony between mythology and science isn't perfect, but it's close enough to raise eyebrows. Coincidence, or correlation? Let's not forget the archaeological oddities. Megalithic structures like those at Gobekli Tepe were buried intentionally, but the context remains suspicious. Built around 9600 BC, right after the Younger Dryas, they stand alone, advanced yet unsupported by any known precursor culture. Their sudden appearance raises a haunting question: were they the work of survivors trying to preserve a lost civilization's knowledge? Or was it the last gasp of something older? This brings us to a deeper tension. Mainstream scholars argue that civilizations rose only after the floods ended. But what if the flood erased the evidence of those who came before? Flood myths may not be metaphors, they might be historical data we haven't learned to read properly. And reading them means decoding ruins, mapping forgotten coastlines, and asking why so many ancient sites sit just above current sea level. In the end, when stones speak and soil holds secrets, it's hard to dismiss the whispers of the past. The layers are there, the timelines overlap, and the world we know may be built atop one we barely remember. But to truly understand what was lost, we have to examine not only where these floods struck, but what those waters may have washed away from human memory. Imagine a civilization advanced for its time, thriving, building, mapping stars, suddenly facing a wall of water. No chance to prepare, no time to escape. Everything vanishes in days: infrastructure, language, records, tools. And when the waters recede, what's left? A blank slate, scattered survivors, and a long road to recovery. History doesn't always begin, it sometimes restarts. Many scholars assume civilization began around 3500 BC in Mesopotamia. But that may just be the moment the survivors got back on their feet. If a cataclysmic event like the Younger Dryas wiped out coastal settlements, we wouldn't find ruins, we'd find silence. And silence in archaeology often gets mistaken for absence. But in this case, it could mean erasure by sea level rise and time. Look at Gobekli Tepe, advanced, sophisticated, astronomically aligned, yet built by hunter-gatherers. The theory is that these were not inventors, but rememberers. They didn't suddenly gain knowledge, they salvaged what they could. That would explain why structures like this appear out of nowhere, with no evolutionary trail behind them. They were building from memory, not from scratch. A collapse of this scale wouldn't just erase buildings, it would fracture identity. Languages would splinter. Skills would fade. Sacred knowledge would morph into myth. Think of how oral stories mutate across generations. Now picture that happening for centuries, across continents, with only fragments surviving. That's how lost civilizations become legends. And legends, over time, are dismissed as fantasy. Civilization isn't just cities and tools, it's stability. Without crops, calendars, or shelter, survivors regress. They don't write, they hunt. They don't engineer, they adapt. And over time, new societies
It wasn't
form,
an architectural
simpler,
error.
disconnected,
It was an altar
unaware
to
of
the
what came
return of
before.
the waters.
The past becomes sacred because it's unreachable. That's when mythology is born, built on the bones of a forgotten world. There's also a psychological collapse to consider. Imagine watching your world drown and realizing nothing will ever be the same. That trauma rewires how you think, how you raise children, how you relate to time itself. You focus on survival, not invention. Curiosity fades, replaced by caution. In that mindset, the remnants of advanced thinking get buried with the dead. So when we look at the sudden stops in ancient development, the missing links, the lost techniques, we shouldn't ask, why didn't they evolve? We should ask, what reset them? And as we move forward, we'll begin to see that the ruins they left might not be the beginning of civilization, but the ruins of something that came before. When we talk about ancient civilizations, we often imagine rudimentary tools and tribal simplicity. But what if that view is entirely backwards? What if the flood myths don't mark the beginning of knowledge, but the end of it? Structures like Göbekli Tepe and the pyramids seem too precise, too intentional, to be trial and error. Especially when they emerge fully formed, not as slow developments. Let's take megalithic structures, massive stones cut, transported, and arranged with precision modern machines would struggle to replicate. Sites like Baalbek, Sacsayhuaman, and Puma Punku defy conventional explanation. Mainstream archaeology calls it brilliant stonework with primitive tools. But many researchers suggest this may be reverse logic. We're underestimating, not overestimating, the builders. Göbekli Tepe was constructed around 9600 BC, yet features carvings, astronomical alignments, and symbolic architecture with no clear precursor. Who taught them to observe the sky? Who designed the engineering behind the circular enclosures? The answer often given, they figured it out. But maybe they didn't. Maybe they remembered, or maybe they salvaged what was left from those who came before. It's not just about tools. It's about intention. Many of these ancient sites show an understanding of geometry, magnetism, and acoustics that suggest more than guesswork. Consider the way the pyramids align with celestial bodies, or how sound resonates perfectly in some underground chambers. These aren't random outcomes, they reflect design principles, knowledge, and purpose. This idea makes people uncomfortable because it flips our sense of progress. We like to believe we've come from nothing and steadily improve, but what if we're just recovering from something greater? A civilization with access to forgotten energy systems, mapping capabilities, or architectural secrets may have existed before the Great Flood, wiped
It wasn't just stone.
leaving only stone skeletons
It was a
behind.
message carved with impossible
For
precision.
example, the precision of the Great Pyramid's alignment to true north, off by only a fraction of a degree. Modern compasses can't achieve that without satellites. Or the uniform cuts in massive stones at Pumapunku, where each block seems carved with laser-like symmetry. These anomalies challenge our narrative of linear progress, and hint at something we've overlooked. If a lost civilization had knowledge we no longer understand, it makes sense that myths would try to preserve it. But over time, myth becomes metaphor. Symbols replace schematics. Gods replace engineers. And suddenly, what was once real becomes legend. But the next layer of evidence might just reveal that technology didn't begin after the flood, it nearly ended with it. There's a fine line between mythology and memory, especially when ancient stories survive thousands of years. What if flood myths weren't symbolic but distorted accounts of real events? Collective trauma often hides behind symbols, gods, and parables. When people lack writing, they preserve history in poetry and metaphor. So myths may not be fiction, just encrypted facts. Many of these myths appear around the same general periods. Sumerian flood tales date to around 2000 BC, Hindu texts even earlier, and Mesoamerican legends predate colonial record-keeping. It's curious how they emerge globally just after periods of major geological shifts. As if they were trying to remember something big enough to scar the collective human psyche. Let's look at the Younger Dryas, a sudden climate shift that happened between 12,900 and 11,700 BC. It began with a sharp freeze, followed by rapid warming and massive ice melt. Sea levels rose. Coastlines vanished. Rain fell for generations. Sound familiar? This period coincides eerily with the earliest signs of human settlement in elevated regions, possibly refugees from drowned worlds. Then there's the Black Sea Deluge, around 5600 BC. Scientists suggest that melting glaciers raised the Mediterranean Sea high enough to breach into the Black Sea basin. The result? A massive wall of saltwater flooded in, transforming farmland into seafloor. Sediment cores confirm this with sudden transitions from freshwater to marine organisms, proof etched in mud. These aren't isolated theories. The same sea level rise patterns are seen across the globe, from North America's coastline shifts to submerged cities off the coast of India. Each location shows abrupt transitions, as if something massive and global hit reset. The archaeological record doesn't deny it, it just hasn't connected all the dots. But the sea did more than flood, it rearranged humanity. It's not that civilizations didn't exist before 4000 BC, it's that they may have existed where we can no longer see them. Underwater. Beneath modern cities. Along coastlines that are now seabeds. We often forget how much land was lost to sea level rise. And with it, whatever evidence those lands once held of early organized life. So maybe the legends weren't just ancient stories to teach humility.
On that night, the sky tore
Maybe they
through
were
time,
cries from those who
and
remembered
history
and
was
couldn't
sealed in thunder.
explain what they saw. The timing of these myths and geological upheavals is too close to ignore. And as we peer deeper into the earth and ocean, we might uncover something that history books have long kept just out of reach. Mainstream archaeology remains cautious, sometimes to a fault. It acknowledges that large-scale floods happened but insists they were local and didn't erase global civilizations. The prevailing view is that structures like Gobekli Tepe were built independently by evolving hunter-gatherer societies. There's no need, they say, to invoke lost civilizations or forgotten technologies. It's a conservative lens, but a limited one. Now compare that to what alternative researchers propose. They argue the same evidence, sediment layers, astronomical alignments, oral traditions, points to something more advanced, more organized. They suggest these weren't primitive experiments, but reconstructions after a collapse. The technology didn't begin in 3000 BC, it was inherited, remembered, and rebuilt by those who survived. It's not science fiction, it's archaeological reinterpretation. This debate often comes down to bias. Traditional scholars demand direct, datable proof, inscriptions, metallurgy, skeletal remains. But when floods bury evidence beneath oceans, how do we find what no longer exists? That's the dilemma. And sometimes, the absence of proof is treated as proof of absence. Which, ironically, is not very scientific. Let's be real, mainstream science has been wrong before. Troy was once a myth. So was the Amazon's lost civilization. Now both are accepted realities. In 1960, the city of Mohenjo-Daro was still dismissed as irrelevant. Today, it's a cornerstone of Indus Valley studies. So we should ask, how many other truths still lie beneath the mud of disbelief? Alternative thinkers like Graham Hancock, Randall Carlson, and others have reignited interest in these questions. They don't reject science, they just widen the lens. They question the rigidity of academic paradigms and propose that mythology, geology, and archaeology are interconnected. That maybe myth is history in disguise, and science should decode, not discard, it. The tension between these camps slows progress. While traditionalists demand hard proof, more agile researchers explore new methods, lidar scanning, underwater archaeology, even AI-assisted pattern recognition. These tools are now revealing lost structures, sunken roads, and ancient coastlines. So the ground, literally, is shifting beneath the old model. In the end, both sides want the same thing, truth. But truth often requires stepping beyond comfort zones. And as new technologies expose what was long hidden, the evidence may force even the most skeptical scholars to rethink their timelines. The question is, are we ready to challenge the story we've always believed? There's a reason why stories of a great flood and lost civilizations never die. They tap into something primal, our fear of erasure and our hope for rediscovery. Atlantis, Lemuria, Mu. Names passed down through mystery, not textbooks. They feel both distant and familiar, like fragments of a dream we can't quite shake. And maybe that's because they come from a time before memory, but not before history. Humanity loves origin stories. We crave explanations for who we are, where we came from, and what we might have forgotten. The idea of a lost civilization destroyed by a cataclysmic event like the Great Flood is more than entertainment. It's psychological closure. It tells us that we weren't always primitive, that maybe, just maybe, we're the survivors of something grand. This fascination isn't just about the past, it's about the future. If advanced societies fell before, could we fall too? What warning is hidden in those flood myths? Maybe the lesson isn't just survival, but humility. Maybe it's telling us to look up from our screens, from our concrete cities, and remember that nature always reclaims what's hers. Modern culture feeds this curiosity through documentaries, books, and viral YouTube theories. People like Graham Hancock challenge the mainstream and spark curiosity in millions. These aren't fringe believers, they're engineers, historians, linguists, and explorers. And their work resonates because it asks the question we're all afraid to face: what if we're not the first? Flood myths, megalithic structures, ancient maps showing ice-free Antarctica, they're puzzle pieces. And the more we find, the harder it becomes to fit them into the conventional narrative. That tension fuels intrigue. It makes people dig deeper, read more, question professors, and follow hunches. This theory persists because it refuses to go away quietly. Even pop culture reflects this obsession. From movies like Noah and Star 2012 Star to games like Assassin's Creed, the theme of ancient civilizations lost to climatic shifts keeps returning. It's the same story, told again and again, in new forms. Not because we've run out of ideas, but because the core story still feels unfinished. Like a page missing from the human timeline. So perhaps the persistence of this theory isn't about wishful thinking or conspiracy. Perhaps it's an instinct. A deep, unshakable feeling that we're living on the ruins of something older. Something wiser. And maybe the sea didn't bury a myth, it buried a mirror. One that still reflects who we were. And what we might become again. If the Great Flood was real, and if it truly wiped away an ancient civilization, then we're not at the beginning of the story. we're in its second act. Everything we call progress might just be recovery. Every myth we once ignored might be a message left behind. And maybe, just maybe, the past is warning the present, before history repeats itself. Imagine what's still buried beneath the waves. Libraries. Temples. Technologies. Stories carved into stone, waiting for someone to notice the unnatural shapes on the ocean floor. We've barely explored 5% of our seas. What if the other 95% holds the answers we keep asking satellites and search engines to find? And if we did find proof, real, undeniable evidence, how would we react? Would it change the way we see ourselves? Would it finally humble our modern pride and remind us we're not the first to think we were the pinnacle of creation? That's not just a historical revelation, it's a cultural revolution. But here's the question that really matters: what are we doing with what we know now? Are we learning from these lost civilizations, or are we repeating their mistakes? We build higher, consume faster, and forget deeper. And if climate shifts once destroyed humanity's golden age, are we ready for what's coming next? Maybe this story isn't just about what was lost. Maybe it's about what we're about to lose, again. Flood myths might not just preserve the past. They may predict the future. And the real test isn't whether we believe in Atlantis or Göbekli Tepe. It's whether we can listen to the warnings left behind before we become the next myth. You, watching this, are part of that decision. Will you question what you've been told? Will you read between the layers of stone, of sediment, of silence? The evidence is out there. The trail is cold, but not gone. And all it takes to follow it is curiosity brave enough to challenge the official story. So ask yourself, what else have we forgotten? What truths lie hidden in ruins, in legends, in the rising sea? And more importantly, are you ready to uncover them? If this video lit a spark in you, subscribe and turn on notifications. Because the flood didn't end the story. It just buried the first chapter. If we're not the first advanced civilization, what does that mean for everything we've been taught? What if we've mistaken ruins for origins, and survival for evolution? And if the Great Flood really reset history once, what's stopping it from doing so again? Are we repeating the same path, blinded by pride, deaf to ancient warnings? Think about it, how much of our truth is just what survived the water? What technologies, what philosophies, what wisdom did we lose to the waves? Now I want to hear from you. Do you believe an ancient high-tech world once existed before the flood, or are the myths just that, myths? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Let's open this discussion and break the silence that has lasted for millennia. Your opinion matters more than you think. And if you felt something shift inside you while watching this, if the dots started connecting, then don't let the trail go cold. Hit the subscribe button now. Turn on notifications and join us as we keep digging into the mysteries they tried to bury. Because here on this channel, the truth doesn't sink, it resurfaces.